Once again, Paul Craig Roberts back with us to answer a number of questions from our viewers about a series of reports he did recently about how regulators have quietly, secretly, unreportedly changed the regulations, changed the rules so that in the next banking crisis, the next collapse of the financial world, they are able now to seize our assets as collateral to cover their losses. So we got a scads of questions on that, Paul. And among them, people were asking what can be done to prevent them from seizing our assets, what we have in our banks, IRAs, all these investments, merely taking them as their collateral to cover their losses. What could be done to avoid that? Is crypto any kind of a solution? And also, will these same regulations affect foreigners who invest in these situations? And also, who is behind this seizure of our assets to be used as their collateral? So, Paul, why don't you kind of run down these questions? We've been getting a lot of them after your series of reports. It really raised a lot of interest among our viewers. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, Larry, I'll do my best. I have to remind everyone that I'm not the one who discovered this. This was discovered by the hedge fund manager who produced the account in The Great Taking, which is available free online or for a nominal charge in print. It was brought to my attention by a person who wanted to know what to make of it. And so I studied it and saw that it could be presented in perhaps a clearer and briefer way than the hedge fund manager had presented it. And this was my contribution. What can be done? Well, there are several aspects to this question. And what the hedge fund manager, his motivation is simply to get the word out because people don't know. And so if people don't know, nothing can be done. Well, and he said that his efforts to get the word out are not successful because either people don't want to hear it because they don't know what to do and it's upsetting, or they're focused on the performance for the day in the markets in order to make their bonuses for the quarter. And so they haven't got any time or energy to go worry about all the money they're making being taken away from them. So he says, the reason the book's free, I'm not trying to make any money. I've made plenty of money. I'm trying to make people aware of what's happened. Well, my view is if enough people are made aware, particularly billionaires, because the same thing is going to happen to them. They're not going to have any more than the poorest person in the community. So if people could be made aware, and important institutions like Merrill Lynch, Wells Fargo, if the financial institutions themselves who are vulnerable could become aware, then the pressure on Congress to use its lawmaking power to overturn the regulations. That's the solution. So awareness is the solution. Everybody who reads my accounts of the situation or reads the hedge fund manager's accounts should spread the word, spread the word, spread the word. The more awareness, they should start asking their own fiduciary institutions, what are you doing to protect me? What is this? And create awareness. And then if you get the awareness and it comes up to Congress, and Congress doesn't know this. This was not done by legislative bodies. It was done by regulators.
Right.
So this is regulatory law, not statutory law. Well, parliaments all over Europe, Canada, Australia, the United States can, with legislation, prohibit, repeal this type of regulation. In fact, they could discipline the people who did it. It's a taking. A taking is unconstitutional. This is why the hedge fund manager titled his book, The Great Taking. I call it the Great Dispossession. But it is a taking, and takings, uncompensated takings, are unconstitutional. So how is it that regulators can regulate unconstitutional regulations? That's the first point of how we do something about it. The other point of how you do something about it is, how do you protect yourself? Well, I don't know, but I suspect a mutual fund might be safe. Why? I don't think mutual funds have creditors. I don't think they operate on leverage. Who are they borrowing from? Now, the question is, where are the mutual funds held? Who is their depository? Well, they are now. It used to be a mutual fund was a retail operation. The person went and bought into the mutual fund from the mutual fund, and it's recorded in his name. And he has the document, like an old-timey stock certificate was issued to a person with a number and his name on it.
Right.
So if you buy a mutual fund retail, not through, say, Charles Schwab, because if you do, Schwab is the depository for the fund. And if Schwab gets in financial trouble, your fund is part of the collateral that Schwab's secured creditors have access to. But if it's a retail account you're holding, unless you have creditors in trouble, it's not recorded as a book entry somewhere that creditors of a depository institution can take. So that's one solution that occurs to me. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's worth thinking about and looking into. Another solution is gold in your possession. Now that's risky if you've got very much and anybody finds out about it, even if you have a safe, because they can hold a gun to your head and say, open it. It's also risky because the government can confiscate it, as they did during the Roosevelt administration in the 1930s. They can confiscate it, and if you hold on to it regardless, and you're found out, you can be subject to extreme penalties. And not every American is willing to take the risk that criminals are willing to take. But that is one possibility. Another possibility is land. If you just buy land, but not on credit. If you buy land with cash, you own the land. There's no creditors involved, so there's no access to your land. So those may be things that you can do to hedge the ability of all your wealth to be taken. So that's the two-part answer to first question, which in many ways is the most important. We can encourage parliaments to be informed and to overturn the regulations, and we can look at these three alternatives I mentioned, and there may be others, where there are no creditors in the picture who have access to your assets because they are not held by a bank. You see, your bank is a depository institution for your bank account.
Right.
So if the bank gets into financial trouble, the bank's creditors have direct access to your deposit. And the same goes for stock.
So, Paul, a lot of people are saying, well, how about crypto? Is that a way to avoid all this? What about crypto?
Yeah. Well, I think crypto will not be permitted, not an independent crypto. The only crypto will be issued by central banks. And the hedge fund manager, who's concerned about all this, says that he thinks that the next financial crisis will be the way the Fed or central banks in general bring in cryptocurrency, because your own bank deposits, your own stocks and bonds will become collateral creditors, and you'll be wiped out. You won't have any way to pay rent, mortgage, car payments, utilities, buy food. And so the Fed will step in and rescue you by establishing cryptocurrency and saying that every month so much will be deposited in your account, cryptocurrency, and you can use that to pay your bills. So, and everybody will be, oh, so relieved we can continue to exist. We now have a way to make our payments, that they will see this as a rescue rather than an entrapment. Because once you have a central bank cryptocurrency, you're completely under the thumb of authorities. If you are dissident, you can be docked or simply denied the crypto. Or if you're making purchases they don't approve of, you lose your account or you lose part of your allotment. You see, it can be used to control the behavior and attitudes of the population. China already has something like this. It's called a social credit system, and they use it to control behavior. If you are taking drugs, they dock you or they stop you from having a driver's license. You can't get a passport. You can't go to the university. If you're disrespectful of your parents, you also get punishment. If you are a poor student, they use it to try to produce appropriate behavior. Of course, we claim they use it for tyranny and all this, and they could well. But so far, it seems to be requiring proper behavior from the population. If you commit criminal acts, you're punished. You lose your access to payments, or you lose rights, driving, for example. So if that's the case, then the only crypto money will be central bank. And that means that you are essentially locked into tyranny, that your independence as a person making independent decisions is taken away. You no longer have that. There'll be no more independent people.
All right, so Paul, so crypto isn't really a solution. Now, how about foreign investors? What's the picture for them?
Well, it's the same. You see, what's happened now is that all national assets are now recorded or logged into a central national network. So all creditors know what the assets are and where they are that back their loans. So this is already accomplished. The accumulation of all holdings is now in a big file, and all creditors know where in that file their collateral is. Well, every country has this. You say this isn't just being done for Americans. This is done for the entire Western world. It includes China and Australia and all of Europe and the United Kingdom. And each country has this central depository, and all of these depositories are linked to an international one. And it's already established and set up so that, say, creditors in Hong Kong of a bank, say, in England or Germany, instantly can take the assets out of that account if the depository institution holding those assets is in financial trouble with them. So there's no recourse. No one has any recourse. Now, it took a number of years to get this through because some of the Scandinavian countries have had the rule that ownership is in the place where it exists. And so that blocked the ability to load those assets into a system that somebody in a distant location had access to. The book that the hedge fund manager wrote explains how the steps they had to go through in the years it took to achieve this result. It wasn't something they just sat down and did in an afternoon. This went on for years. And there's no one in the Western world that escapes it. He doesn't say that Russia and China and India and Africa and Latin America are involved in this. It seems to be something the United States has imposed on itself and its so-called allies, its puppets. So it seems to be a Western world thing. Nevertheless, the Western world may have creditors that are in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
But the assets of the people in the other parts of the world do not seem to be part of the system. But I don't know for sure, but that's not the way I read the book. I didn't see anything about the Indians and the Chinese and the Russians and the Iranians and or whatever, the Saudi Arabians. So it seems to be a way of dispossessing Western people and a way of bringing in central bank cryptocurrency, which, of course, as I already said, terminates any kind of independent individual existence or decision making.
So my question would be then, Paul, from judging by what you said, would it be better to invest in foreign Eastern currencies with China, India? But those are not part of the Western system.
I don't know. I don't know. And you can never know when they're affected by sanctions.
Yeah.
For example, I know people that invested in Russian oil companies. Well, the sanctions didn't hurt it didn't hurt the Russian oil companies. It hurt the Americans.
Yeah.
Invested in them because they have no access to their shares. They have no access to the dividends. Their accounts list the shares as worth zero. It's not even clear they can write them off as a capital loss against any capital gains on the income tax return. There's just no information about it. It's just one day, for example, you could buy Russian oil stocks on Wells Fargo. Now, one day you looked at your account and now it's zero. You said, what the hell happened? Sanctions.
No.
So you don't know. When you live in the United States where there is zero respect for law and there's no integrity in any public institution. I mean, look at all the intentionally false arrests by the FBI. When you live in that kind of country, there's no certainty about anything. You can't take anything for granted. And what seems to be happening is that Americans just don't see that they can do anything, and so they just keep earning money and investing money and doing what they've always done, even though they know it may all be gone. Maybe they pray there won't be a financial crisis.
So, considering everything you've said, then, should we get back to mutual funds as being the only possible solution?
It could be. I just don't know how. I raised this question with some mutual fund people, and they were surprised. They never thought about it, but they said, no, we don't have any creditors. But you see, what the hedge fund manager also points out is that the outstanding derivatives, which could collapse, are many times larger than all of the collateral. So if there's a big collapse, seizing everybody's collateral in the West doesn't cover the collapse. And so the regulators have in the regulations the provision that if there's not enough collateral, additional assets will have to be brought into the definition of collateral.
Hmm.
Well, what assets? So they're talking about your house, your car, your property, your land. And so, in other words, your mutual funds, it could be anything. And that clause in the regulations mean they can take anything that you've got as collateral. Now, this sounds preposterous.
Yeah.
And it is a massive taking. It's unconstitutional, but it's in the regulations. And they have set up, as I said, they've already set up these centralized accounts of all collateral and who has access to it. And they have redefined your ownership of your bank account, your stocks, and your bonds as an entitlement to use until there's a financial crisis. And that's the way, in other words, it's not yours. Even now, it's not yours. You have an entitlement to use something that is the potential property of someone else. And it ceases to be potential property once the crisis hits, then it becomes their real property. Well, this is, and he quotes the regulations saying this.
Well, all right.
So you see, you are defined as a collateral provider. That's what everybody with a bank account, a stock account, a bond account, you are defined in the regulations as a collateral provider. This is their term.
This whole thing seems so impossible that they're pulling this off. And so the final question, Paul, who's behind it?
Yeah, that is the question. We know the regulators are. It seems to be the Federal Reserve. Basically, it's the Federal Reserve, because we have the document that the European Commission sent to the New York Federal Reserve Bank, asking them to explain what the hell is this all about. And the explanation that the Federal Reserve Bank of New York gives them is exactly what I've just said. You own nothing. No, nobody in Europe owns anything of their bank accounts or their stocks or their bonds, whether they are German bank accounts or American bank accounts. They don't own them. They are able to use them, but they are the potential property of creditors. And this is what the bail-in meant. This is what the bail-in that replaced the bailout means. And that's what the regulators have achieved. And so when did it start? Some of it started long before the financial crisis in 2008. But since 2008, there's been what, 15 years. So they've been working on it in this sense, at least 15 years. And in other senses, it began once they replaced stock certificates issued to an individual, numbered stock certificates issued to an individual that you kept in your files or in your safe deposit box. Once they replaced that with book entries, you are no longer identified with any specific shares.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they said this is convenience because it's so much trouble with all the transactions to be forever changing the names on the stock certificates and printing them and sending them. So it's all a book entry. Well, it began, I guess, with that. And that may not have been intentionally part of what they're doing now. So they already had some foundations. They inherited some foundations just from past changes. But since 08, you assume it's been 15 years, they've been working to dispossess us. And so now I think it makes sense. We know what Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum mean when they say you will own nothing.
And be happy.
You don't already. And
maybe we'll go back to the barter system, beaver pelts, like the black.
I think that people have to take this seriously.
Yeah.
They've got to spread the word. They've got to start pressing their banks, their depository institutions, Schwab, Merrill Lynch, all of them. What are you doing to protect us? Where were you when they were making these regulations? Where's the SEC? Why is the Fed doing this? Where did the Fed get the authority to rework the regulations in a way that's unconstitutional? You're not allowed takings. You can't one day say, no, your property belongs to the creditor of this bank, not you. There's no such thing as ownership. Ownership, that doesn't mean anything anymore. You don't own anything because it's all susceptible to being taken for some third party, and for which you have no responsibility. It's not your fault that a depository institution got in trouble, but you are held responsible. Your property is taken from you because of the mistake of a third party in order to reward a fourth party. Well, people need to, this should be a huge public discussion. There should be hell raised about it constantly. And do we want to get blown off the face of the earth? What's to be gained by that? Why are we doing that? There's no discussion of that. None. The president of Serbia said the other day that the West and Russia will be at war in 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
The train has left the station. No one can stop it. How can this be? There's no public discussion. The people don't know this. You can ask it about anything. What are they? Do they have in store for us another pandemic? Why all this stuff about bird flu? Why do they already have a vaccine for bird flu?
Also, they're making moves to reinstitute the draft.
Yeah. If you're going to have a draft, it means you intend to go to war. Well, why? Who are you going to go to war with? Russia? So, the draft isn't going to help. It's insane. And where's the discussion? You would have thought that the minute it hit the news that the House of Representatives had passed a bill reinstating draft for 18 to 26-year-olds, the universities would be in an uproar. There'd be protests everywhere. There would just be, but there's not a word.
Yeah. And that's another contrast, how much has changed back in the 60s, Vietnam War, the campuses were on fire with protest.
Yeah. Silent. They protest or tried to the Israeli slaughter of the Palestinians, but their own slaughter is up. You know, everybody should be able to see if France sends a foreign legion into Ukraine, that's just the opening wedge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if I've mentioned it on any of your shows or not, but I've just learned that now a common theme in Russian TV talk, foreign affairs and all that, is that, well, if the Americans bring European troops or their own troops, we're going to draw on our new relationship with North Korea. We're going to bring North Korean troops.
Yeah. This is, as you say, there's no alarm and very little awareness of any of it. The mainstream media is simply not reporting it. And
That's right.
how most people get their information, so-called information. So, Paul,
So to sort of come back to the initial question, what can we do? We have to spread awareness. That's why I wrote up what I wrote. And I think that's why you had the program. And I think that people will know what to do. They need to talk this up. They talk it up to everybody, their golf partners, their business partners, their business friends. Ask their banks, ask their depository institutions, what are you doing to protect my account? If they don't take an interest and push it, nothing's going to happen. If it gets to be an issue, Congress can stop it because statutory law overrules regulatory law. The Congress can simply stop. In fact, the people who did it, in my view, could all be arrested and indicted and sent away for life. That's my opinion. It's a massive crime that it's fraud on a major scale.
well, we'll end with the hope that what we've said here today and what others are reporting
Yeah.
will raise an alarm, and the alarm will lead to a solution. But, you know, again, the way things are going, those are probably high hopes. So, Paul, thanks once again for the information, and we'll be keeping our viewers updated on this and other issues that are drastically affecting our lives with very few people even realizing what's going on. Paul, thanks.